Dear ancestors, and all original inhabitants of this dwelling, hello from the future. As I lay here writing, I realize the first thing you'll probably notice are the lights. I tried to imagine the light of the fire as the only source of light you have. I have artificial light, so I can write these words, even though it's dark outside. You have probably never held a pen or paper. There's so little firsthand written history from you or your counterparts. So our history has been served to me personally in piecemeal. So many stories have died with you, many undoubtedly so painful that the repression of them were both inevitable and intentional. I want all Americans to take this in. En masse, the history of an entire race in this country is so painful that our great-great-grandparents wouldn't even discuss it with the people they love and trust. The history of the enslaved people in America, the real history, didn't make it into the history books. In fact, last I heard, and according to a middle school in Texas, you, my enslaved ancestors, were just displaced immigrants or migrant workers. I was never taught the truth about you in school. I'm in 6th grade and my history teacher, Ms. Canard, walks in, opens up to whatever page in that brick of a history book, then painstakingly transcribes every single word of the chapter we're reading. In complete silence. Only the sound of the chalk on the board. She never even bothers to look at us. Then, we each take turns reading her transcriptions from the board. It is, in fact, the most mind-numbing period of the day, and sometimes I think I actually fall asleep while I'm reading out loud. In 1492, Christopher Columbus, blah, 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 what's his name, walked across the moon and planted the American flag. One step for who gives any shits. George Washington was inaugurated as our first president on I wish I gave any fucks about what you're talking about right now. It's strange how disinterested I'd become in history that year. I mean, yeah, she was a lousy teacher. But even now, I have a keen interest in historical events, and my idea of a ring-a-ding vacation is generally a full week at the Smithsonian. I'm kind of a nerd that way. I remember the day I came to class right after having watched the PBS documentary on Emmett Till. Emmett Till was a 14-year-old black child from Mississippi accused of offending a white woman by whistling at her in a grocery store. My guess is that he just went in and bought the 1955 equivalent of Skittles and a soda. He was 14. Several nights after the store incident, this woman's kin went to Emmett's house, abducted him, and mutilated him before shooting him in the head and sinking his body in the Tallahatchie River. His mother insisted on a public funeral service with an open casket to show the world the brutality of the killing. Emmett's murderers were acquitted of his killing. Mom, isn't our family from the South? Is this what happened to black people when you were younger? This was only 60 years ago. Mom, is this our history? God, I cried and cried that night and lamented Miss Canard's class even more. Ancestors, I'm not particularly proud of this, but in the 10th grade, I all but dropped out of school, showing up for tests only. I aced those tests, pissing off teachers and administrators alike. How could this girl who hardly attends class get A's on all the tests? Well, if the test questions were, what is the velocity of Ms. Canard's ass jiggling as she regurgitates textbook copy on the board, I guess I would have failed. What I'd figured out was that none of these teachers gave a shit about me. And if I just read the textbooks and had a few conversations with my classmates in the bathroom in between nicotine contraband, I could pretty much figure things out. Anyway, post Emmett Till documentary, I understood that whatever Ms. Canard was doing, it wasn't teaching me history. So I cut her class and spent hours in the library reading and researching Black history in America. Told ya, I'm a nerd. I have seen pictures of the apparatus used to terrorize and enslave you ancestors in pictures and books and movies. I've even seen some of the artifacts behind glass at museums, but it always felt so sterilized and set away from the scene of the crime. Tonight, to actually see some of the torture devices in the space where they were used, this additional context is so new to my senses. We don't talk about this much, but I think there's a tangible, visceral deprivation I feel because so much of our history is lost. It's not zero impact. I once tried to complete one of those ancestry maps online. The exercise ended with me in tears in the ice cream aisle at Hannaford's. I couldn't get any further than my great-grandparents. I don't know where we landed on this continent or where we lived on the other. There's a permanent hole in my heart that maybe this experience will help to fill. Ancestors, I know that you didn't have the right to own anything I'm touching right now. And so I'm trying to imagine myself here with you living in this small room centuries ago, without light bulbs or pens, appropriate clothing or ventilation, sleeping on cold, hard wooden planks. And what I feel with all of my senses is how strong you are. Physically strong to endure the work and the conditions. Emotionally strong to endure the unbearable struggle and emotional abuses. And psychologically strong because your oppressors are right above you, right upstairs. You can almost see them through the cracks in the floorboards. I can see the room right now. I can hear the footsteps and the kettle boiling and the babies crying. You can too. The people who lay claim to you as property are physically separated from you by 2 fucking inches of wood. I can't imagine the restraint. I feel your strength between the walls of this room and between my own skin and bones. We are the originators of grit. Now, I know what I'm about to write is contextually implausible, but it's a feeling so big in me that I have to give it some air. I would have tried to kill them. Those people upstairs that are so close I can smell them, the ones who put chains on the doors at night and collars around my neck in the morning, as I lay here staring at the small spaces between the floorboards, my gaze keeps falling on those huge iron poles hanging on the wall. Did you ever, even for a moment, think about killing them? These feelings of rage and violence, well, I'm not a murderer, so they've taken me a bit by surprise. But they are so close. I can hear them breathing. And on my exhale, all I can think of are the words, "You don't get to own me." So what else is different? Well, besides what must seem like an unbelievable amount of opulence, air mattresses and sleeping bags and water bottles and melatonin pills. I mean, I had to get a good night's sleep. You'll notice that there are white and black people here sleeping on the same floor, side by side. Don't be alarmed. We are not in danger, sort of. Now we live side by side, one another in many places in America, and in some ways, we experience equality. But don't be fooled too much by these optics. If something were to accidentally happen to injure one of our white overnight hosts and we needed to call paramedics or the police, you'd be looking at a room full of terrified brown people, and that fare would feel very familiar to you. Most likely, given where we are, the authority that would respond would be a white man. And all of us, consciously or unconsciously, would say a silent prayer that he is a righteous one, that his gun won't replace the whip tonight. Oddly, I'm not afraid down here with you, and like Dara, I wish I had bought some offerings. I take a deep breath. There is so much to explain about the time and space between your world and mine, and all the things that have changed, and all the things that are the same. All of it complex, nuanced, winding, and nonlinear. We fought for rights you didn't have that some of us now don't use, like the right to vote. We have more economic parity, but that money leaves our community almost as quickly as it comes in. And some of us are in the same class as the overseers. We call that class the 99% now. I know I can't go back in time and rewrite history and take away all your suffering and all the trauma which has been inherited by each generation after you, making it hard for me sometimes to differentiate between the past and the present. But I wish your stories had not died with you. And that is the great gift of tonight. Through our voices, perhaps some of it has not. In loving connection, Tameka. Thank you.